I talked to you yesterday, and I was like, "Hey, I'm sick of carrying your weight." What? No, I'm just kidding. No, but we were talking about uh like thinking of things that we might want to discuss. Did you? I'm gonna be honest. I like when we talked an hour ago. I was like, I got nothing. I thought of nothing.
Don't worry, I got us, man.
Did you
I
have some things?
figured, yeah, I got a few
Cool.
things that I want to run by you.
Yeah, that'd
So
be
I figured this one we would just kind of go with like a light topic, and so I was thinking that we could talk about death.
yeah. No, keep it breezy, baby.
So anyway, so here's like
No, we're gonna talk about death, but not killing people, right, Brett?
no, not killing people,
No murder.
no murder, no nothing,
Just
nothing like that.
simple dying.
Yeah, thinking about dying.
Now,
So anyways, I guess this like I feel like this topic is like it's kind of come up like in a few different a few different places for me, and so it's like it's something that I've been contemplating and thinking about. And so the first is like so there's like this ultra running coach that I follow, and he anyways, his story was that he was like this premier coach. He was a very good runner, but he only did like short distance stuff. And he's from Colorado. Anyways, he was out biking and got hit by a car, and the car hit him. And he was, I think he said that he was traveling at by like on his bike at about 25 miles an hour when he was hit, and then he was hit by a moving car that was going even faster.
okay.
So he was, and there was other bikers out, so they actually saw the accident, and they have like the webcam footage of the police officers who arrived on the scene, like immediately afterwards.
Hmm.
So he was flung about 100 feet into like a metal gate, like into a metal fence. Sorry,
Yeah.
and he was concussed. He had a bunch of broken like bones and stuff. Miraculously, he ended up being like okay. So he talks about how like so anyways after this he has like this near death experience. His he talks about how he has like a son that was only like one at the time, one and a half. And as he's like flying through the air, he has like the thought like I'll never see my son grow up.
Mm.
And then he hits the fence. Or sorry, yeah, hits the fence. Anyways, afterwards, he says that, he starts to, he's like in that moment, and in the aftermath, like, and he says part of it, like his brain wasn't functioning because he had to deal with like coming back from the serious concussion that he had. But what was really driven home for him was how like impermanent this like life is. And because he had extremely high, anxiety, he'd always been kind of afraid to really go for it. And part of the way that he had justified like never like going for it in the big races, and most big races in like trail running are typically at the 100-mile distance.
Hmm.
And so so what he did was he stayed pretty much doing like the shorter distance stuff. And he said that he had this rule that he would never run a race if he had one of his athletes was in it, because he didn't want to be competing against one of his own athletes. And so I listened to he and his wife, they have a podcast. And so he says like afterwards, he's like, that was just basically was kind of my excuse. But when in this moment, he's like, there's part of me that he's like never came back out of like the ditch that he was flung into. He's like, there's a part of me that's still in that ditch. He says, but there's also part of my like brain that just like shifted and was this life doesn't go on forever. And it can end pretty quickly. He was like, I was out biking, enjoying myself, having an amazing day, and in a split second, like it could have all been over. So anyways, like as he says, as he's contemplating like his own death and his own life, like and how impermanent all of this like our like physical life is, he decides that he's going to actually go for these big races. And so he does one of the races that's called the Leadville 100, which is one of the most famous races here in the U.S. And it had a course record that was set like 20 years ago,
Okay.
and nobody had been able to beat it. So he goes out and in his debut 100-mile race, like beats this course record by like 15 minutes in his debut. And then after that, then he goes and runs like 8 weeks later. He runs a second 100-mile here in Arizona, and he wins that one as well. I think he missed the course record by like 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he talks about it, he says, I would never would have gone for these races if I hadn't been in that crash. And he's like, he's like, when I look back on it, do I wish that I hadn't been hit by a car? And he's like, yes, absolutely. I wish that I hadn't got hit by a car. And part of me will never like fully recover from that. But he's like, it also forced me to have to be tough and also have to look at my own life and the way that I was living it and what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And so there was that voice like I was like listening to and contemplating about that. And then in going to like church, like the pastor, he basically he was sharing something that was like pretty like similar. He shared let me pull it up for you real quick. There's a Psalms that that he shared, and it says, "So teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." It's that Psalms 90:12. And so like I started to like really like think about it. And I think part of it also like when you kind of like I'm 46, and I started looking at like, like the national average apparently for men is like 76 or something like that. I thought it was higher. I thought it was in the
Yo,
80s.
me too.
Yeah. But anyways, apparently it's like it's 76. I'm like, I have less years left. If I was to live to just the average, I
Yeah,
have less
you don't live
years
to be
left.
140, you psycho.
What's that?
I think you're going to be 140 when you die. And you'll still be running marathons.
Yeah, I hope so.
You're gonna die in the middle of nowhere on mile marker like 82.
Yeah, I hope so, man. That'd be a good way to go.
Anyway.
But anyways, it's just like, and there was like this, there was like also like this other quote from like Marcus Aurelius, and he says, let me see here, I got it written here too, and he says, you could leave right now. Let that determine what you will do and say and think. And so they say they're like, there's like this practice of like the Stoics that it's like every day begin the day by thinking about your death. And it sounds like really like kind of morbid and stuff, but it's like, I think it's like this way of like trying to refine, like, like whenever you go through something that's like really hard and traumatic, there's like a way of it like refining like your values and what's important in your life. And it has a way of like sharpening like what's important, because I think it's very easy to be like distracted in this life. So these are like, anyway, so these are like some of my thoughts. What do you think about this so far?
Home run, Brett. Like, I think I could go for hours on this. You made me. I've had 7 stories go through my mind and all these thoughts. Maybe we'll try this one on first. Do you know the life of Dostoevsky very well? Do you know much about him or anything? Have you read Dostoevsky at all? Of course you have.
Yeah, I've read some. Like I've read oh gosh, what is it? Notes from Underground, which is like which is awesome. The Brothers Karamazov, however you say.
Dude, I've always wanted to read that one. That one sounds
Yeah,
awesome.
that's the one that more normally people quote, like that a lot of people quote and talk about. But yeah, so okay, why do you ask?
So I can't even remember where I heard this. I don't even know if this is true, but in one of his books, he tells a story of a man who's sentenced to death. And I am a dummy, so I haven't read this, but this was relayed to me secondhand. Anyway, but he but the way it was relayed to me is he tells this story, and there's like a line of people that are like going to the executioner's block or like going to the hangman's noose, right? And he tells this story from the perspective of this guy in this line, and like I don't know, like I'm thinking like a being in like Disneyland, and every time the line inches forward, you know,
You
and
go around a corner, there's more line.
but like at the end of the line, like every time it inches forward, you're like, oh, I'm one step closer to death. Like it's right there. Like I'm thinking of being in this line anyway, and talking about like just the awful anxiety, like just your senses shut down. You don't like people try to talk to you and you can't process the sounds coming out of their mouth. You can't bring in, it's interesting. One of the things that I like in school, they talked about the neuroscience of like anxiety, and high anxiety shuts off the exterior world. It shuts off the present moment. And it actually, it's interesting. It actually turns you very inwardly focused, and like you don't process the world around you very much. uh anyway, so it talks about like going through this, and then like there's one guy in front of him and he's supposed to be next, and for some reason like he's saved. Like I don't know, like I don't remember the story, but he doesn't get executed. And and this guy talks about, or you know, in the story he talks about like air tasting different, and every color that enters your eye, every light that hits your eye like looks more vivid, and just like every second of life just feels more intense and like vibrant and full of energy, and you know what I mean. And so it's interesting, like we all are aware we're gonna die, right? Like I think we all get that, but there's these moments where like it's almost like this really profound recoding of the way we like filter and interpret the world, because there's these moments where like people get this retuning. uh our good buddy Rio, which I think, were you there when he dropped, someone dropped a blanket off of like Cave Dave's little cave that he lived in? And we might have even told this story, but I'll tell it again. Like Rio's like, well, I can get that, and it's the blanket fell down and it was, I don't know, 100 feet up a cliff, right? And Rio, my friend, who like I can endlessly tell stories of him getting into like the hairiest, wildest situations. He's like a wild man, right? And I don't have more stories about any human on earth, you know. Anyway, so Rio tells me about this. I wasn't there, but Rio tells me he's climbing this cliff, and he pulls himself up and he looks over this little, just a little like ledge on the cliff, and he's looking into it, and he sees the bones and a couple of feathers of a dead bird that had like, I don't know, like died there and had been decomposing for a while, but he could just see like the bones and the beak and stuff. And he says it just struck him all at once. The way he tells the story is so funny, because he tells it like it never crossed his mind. He goes, oh, I could just die, like right now, like I could just die. And the rest of the story is he ends up getting rimrocked up there, and he ends up sitting on like a ledge, kind of just propped up there on top of this cliff in the middle of nowhere, and he has to wait like 2 hours for somebody to run home and like get some ropes and like uh rappel down to him and grab him and rescue him. Anyway, but just this.
And
Oh,
Kyle was up at the top dropping Skittles down to him to keep him from trying
to
to do
nourish
anything
him.
stupid. Yeah. Yeah, to nourish him with like some
So
Skittles.
funny.
I just
Super
picture
funny,
him
man.
like
Yeah,
trying to
so
go for one.
anyway, so like that's a story. Yeah, like it's interesting. Like, how do we interact with the knowledge of our death, and how does it affect us? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think like, I mean, I think like, like I share that kind of like two kind of like, or like where it's like other people like talking about it. And I think like more directly for me is like, like my mom has cancer right now.
Yeah.
And, like my brother, who's the doctor, when she was diagnosed, he said, like the thing to pay attention to is he's like, we want to pay attention to the frequency that like other seemingly like unrelated emergencies start to happen. And so it's like a few months later, she had a stroke. Now she's been in this past like week, she's been to the emergency room 3 times, had to
Yeah.
go like, so it's like, yeah, the emergencies are getting closer and closer together. And he's like, that's what you pay attention to.
Yeah.
And it's so, and
Yeah. Keep going. I'm listening.
yeah, anyways, it's a weird feeling. I think of like my mom's like influence on my life, and I would like, I've always said like I compare it to like kind of standing on the shore of an ocean, and you can't see like the end of it, because my mom was like always like my mom was always there. And so it's like my psychology was heavily created in interacting with her psychology, because she was the main person that was there. I mean, my dad was there as well, but it was like, I mean, obviously he was like at work, he was gone, like, because he was in the military, like for training things a lot when we were growing up, like particularly when I was young, less so like later on, is he like got higher ranked. But so my psychology was heavily influenced by her. And so like when you feel like the end is near for this person whose influence is like the size of the ocean,
Yeah.
like it's a really like it's a weird feeling, because it's almost like, as I see her, and she was like always like very like she's always just like she's so strong, like always has been, like I remember like last year I was doing this race up in the Tushers, like near Beaver where they live. And I was coming into this aid station, and I was there a little bit earlier than they were expecting. My mom has like cancer, and she's like running up this road to me, like with this bucket full of like watermelon, like, because it was just like, even though it's like I haven't lived at home in a very like long time, but it's just like her like desire to take care of me,
Yeah.
was like still there. And it's like I remember talking to the race director like afterwards, because they were there like when I finished, and and I know him because he's like a local guy here, and so we've like run races together and stuff. And I was just like, dude, you see, like that's my mom over there, she's like the toughest person on this whole mountain. There's a lot of people out there doing tough stuff, but I'm like, dude, she's like, she's battling cancer, and she's like out here, like supporting her
They're
kids
bringing
and
you
stuff.
watermelon in a bucket.
Yeah, I know, like running, like with a, you know, she got no business doing that, but she couldn't help herself.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I mean, I think about that one, like that's probably the one that's like the biggest, is like your parents are like so critical and pivotal in your life, and then it's like it it's being like, obviously we don't know like when she's gonna go, but like I think we all have the sense that it's not a long time.
Yeah. Well, it's like we're aware of it, but all of a sudden you go, oh, like I need to. This is present now. It's present. You know. Um, and it's been interesting for me. I always get a real kick out of people that I really love or enjoy or like look up to. Uh, I get a kick out of or just people that I find unique, right? I get a kick out of meeting where they or learning more about where they came from, right? And we've been friends for a number of years, but I think it's just a few years ago I met up with you down in Beaver at your parents' house, and I met your mom and your dad, and I didn't get to interact with your dad much that time. I got to know him a little bit better, like on the first time you did the Mogion 100, right? But
Hmm.
it was really fun for me because I do find you like a very unique human that I'm like, how do you make a bread, right? And it was so present watching, like just interacting with your mom was almost immediately palpable. I was like, oh, well, to get unique people, they come from unique people, right? And you talk about like strength, and I really don't, I haven't interacted with your mom a lot, but she's almost, she's easily consumable. Like you're around her for just a minute and you get a very deep sense of who she is without her doing anything, without her like, let me tell you about my life or anything. Like like she emits it. At least that's how I felt. Like, and she has like just this quiet confidence and certainty and calmness about everything that she does, the way that she interacts with people. And anyway, that I just, it's weird. Like I can't put a finger on it, but I found her profound immediately. You know what I mean? And so I'm curious about this, Brett. I do this a lot, like as a therapist. Like death brings people through my door a lot, you know? And I'm curious, like, as you step into this place where you can no longer just pretend that it's not coming, like it's coming, you know,
Yeah.
with what sounds like you may have somebody as big as your mother in your life, but I don't think you got anyone bigger. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, like just one of the biggest relationships that exists in any human's life, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, as you can't look away anymore, like how are you processing that, and like what are you thinking about? And
Yeah. I mean, I think so. Part of it, I guess, like the easy, not the easy part, but part of it is initially like on the I don't know how to say it other than like the strategy side. So my parents live like in a like kind of a, I wouldn't say remote, but it's pretty rural. It's not exactly easy to get to.
yeah,
And there's not a lot of facilities that are there. Like there's not a lot like to work with.
we're
And
essentially
so like,
talking a couple of gas stations. It's that kind of town.
yeah, yeah, very small.
Yeah,
And so like the first part, I mean, there's 8 kids in my family. And so one of the things that's like cool about it is like 8 kids is like a lot of kids. And because my dad was in the military, we grew up in Germany, and so we were over there by ourselves. Like we didn't have family close by. Like it was us. Like I mean, for me, like in my situation, I live like next door to my in-laws. They help us out like so much. Like we do, like I don't know how we do it without them. You know, but with with my parents, like it was that. I mean, they had like they would make friends. Like my mom, like primarily through the church. My dad had his work and 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 eh, like in the church as well, LDS church. And I don't know. It's like it's amazing. Like I look at it, like it's like we joke about it now, where it's like it's a miracle that all of us like lived like into adulthood.
mm-hmm.
Um, And I guess and it required like so much effort on her part. And now it's like it's time, like it's towards the end, like for her. And now there's like all these kids that she raised. And it's like I have one sister who's going to move in with them to help take care of them. Her husband like works down in St. George and is gone during the week. So she's going to do that. But she's like, but I need, you all to come on the weekends. And so part of this is like strategy and management. Like how do we how do we do this and cover it and make sure that she's taken care of, And it's almost like that cycle of life where it's like she took care of us, and now it's time to take care of her. Not out of any other like obligation or anything, but it's just like that's the cycle of life. Like that's the way it's supposed to be. Like
Yeah.
she's getting to where it's like, we're born not able to walk.
And she's
We're born
returning
not
to it.
able to do a lot of these things, and she's getting to that point, where it's like it's extremely difficult for her to walk. So she has to, you're not carrying her like you do an infant, but you have to push her in a wheelchair. Um, like it's difficult to use the restroom. Like so it's like this interesting like cycle of life where it's like this person who gave so much, like now it's time to, in a way, give in a similar way that she gave. So there's that side of it. As far as like the
Yeah.
emotional side, like the emotional side of like what do you
Well,
do? Like what's that?
can I just real quick before you move on to the emotional side, just because I'm resonating with what you're talking about a lot. Uh, I got three grandparents that were a part of my life. My grandpa on my dad's side died when I was a few months old, so I never knew him. But the other three, my grandma Connie, when she passed away, having just a little bit of medical background, I remember I stayed the night with her last night and was able to kind of just monitor things a little bit. Not like I have like crazy knowledge or anything, but monitor things a little bit and to make sure she was comfortable and even just like swabbing around. But it felt like this real honor and privilege to care for those who cared for me in those moments when they needed it the most. In fact, the only moment where that dynamic shifts and like like you said, your mom, her purpose is still to care for you,
Yeah, even
right? And and just in the last moment it's going to shift where like no, it's now your job to care for her. And it just feels like such an honor to be able to care for those who cared for you. I remember after she passed, I don't know why this was important to me, but uh I and maybe it's a little weird, but I stayed because I knew that the mortuary was coming. And for me, like I just needed this moment of closure because I was trying to be there and care for her. And even after she passed, like I didn't know where it was okay to leave her. Yeah, and for me, like I needed to hand her off to somebody, right? And so when the mortuary came, and I asked, I says, "Can I help you guys transfer her body?" Right, and so I helped them move her from the bed over to like the gurney that they would take her over to the mortuary with, and then I was able to do it. I says, "Okay, I've handed her off to the care of these people." Anyway, it's like a really meaningful moment for me, and then I had my other two grandparents, and it was the same thing of just just any any relationship in your life that's given you so much, and then realizing that like it's a debt that could never be repaid. It's just
no.
you're eternally, infinitely in debt to them. Anyway, so yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that idea of like caring for those who cared for you, I really like that. You were about to talk about what it's like for you emotionally.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to kind of like say like one more thing on that, like, I have a son and then I have two stepdaughters, and the stepdaughters are with us, like half the time. My son's with us all the time. And the amount of effort that it takes, like with those three, like it's a lot. And it still boggles my mind that almost completely unsupported that she was able to raise like eight kids. Like the amount of like my dad's a tough dude. Like he was an army ranger. He did all these marathons, all this like tough, very tough guy, but like raising kids is hard. Like it's amazing and it's awesome, but it's also hard. The attention that you have to give, the focus that you have to give, um, it's a lot, and I don't know how she did it with 8 kids.
I
Like
often,
I honestly don't. Like it's like I don't know how she did it.
I often find with patients that like let's say like you've got a hard, like this isn't you, but let's say you've got a hard relationship with your parents, and like things during your youth and teens were kind of hard. uh I often feel like children, when those people have their own children, that oftentimes their children kind of act as like savior figures for them, because for the first time in their life, or maybe not the first time, but in a different way, a way that's like they couldn't have fully understood, all of a sudden they go, oh, like this is what it was like to be my mom or my dad. And I'm kind of getting that from like what you're sharing, that as you
Yeah, except
step into,
I can't. For me, like it's like I can't comprehend it.
yeah, yeah,
You know what I mean? Because I'm saying that it's like with 3 kids, like it's hard. Like it's hard. Like I love it, and it's cool and it's amazing, but it's hard and it takes time. And I'm like, I don't know how she did it. Like I don't know how. I mean, my dad as well, because it's like credit to him. So like both of them.
yeah.
But
I,
it's like I don't know how they I don't know how they did it with
I
that many kids and
I
where
hear
we
a lot
were.
of reverence in like the way you talk
Yeah,
about your parents. And what I'm hearing is, as you've stepped into parenthood yourself, like someone who already was trying to, like, already reverenced and loved and was in awe of his parents, is like, oh, like even like leaning into and like accepting and wanting to really be thankful for what they did for me. Like I still didn't get it. I couldn't comprehend what they've done and what they've accomplished and who they are, and how much they did under such a great weight. Because you're right, man. And that's the thing. Like I was just talking about like people that I talk about, or that I, and even myself, like I had a hard relationship with my dad, and your mom had 8 kids, and I get the impression, and maybe you can correct me on this, because it's hard to do everything perfect, but I get the impression that like she kind of hit a home run while caring for 8 kids. You know what I mean? I mean, just
yeah. I mean, it wasn't perfect. It
when,
wasn't. It wasn't perfect. I had like my youngest brother went off, went out the deep end for a little bit, and then came around, and is in a lot of ways the best of the bunch. Like and some of that I think because of the difficulties that he went through.
yeah,
Like I think in his rebellion, he kind of learned to take ownership of his life
yeah.
because he,
Well,
even though it was like in not great choices, like, yeah, anyways,
see,
in a way,
that's
like
the same.
he learned it to work through disappointment.
But that's the same thing. Like the measure of a good parent isn't that their kids never struggled; it's that they did it with them. And the fact that he struggled and came out of it better on the other side, once again, you had some pretty impressive parents,
No, yeah,
and you
agreed,
were
man.
not anywhere. You know?
Yeah, yeah. So, and then I guess going back to like what I was gonna pivot to, like on the emotional like side of that, I don't think. I mean, other than like sometimes like I'll sit and I'll think about it, like what is the world like when if she's not here? Um, and that gets me like pretty sad. Like I feel like I'm pretty early, like in the, I guess like trying to move through that. Like as things become more serious with her, then there's a part of like then the seriousness of recognizing the grief that's coming like comes as well. And then it's like like then anyways, like, and then I think my dad will be around for a while. But there's also something that's kind of weird to think, like, when they're both gone, like that they're not here. And then it's like once they're gone, then again, there's also like I get this sense and this feeling of like, like we were talking about like being in line, like, and then it feels like you're next up, like that generation's gone, like you're next up in the rotation.
Yeah.
And I think like, and I'm not trying to, again, like I'm not trying to be like morbid on like not morbid, but it's like or dark or something. But it's just like it's like really being like honest and like in thinking like the beginning of every day is a new day, and every sunset's the end of a day, and every yeah, it's just like we don't have like a lot of time, even if we live to the average. Like our time on this planet is a blip. Like even just on the time frame of like the Earth's existence, it's a very short period of time, and you get this feeling that it goes on for a long time, and then you get to these moments where it's like you're forced to recognize that it doesn't.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? Like I'm like, okay, 30 years. Like what do I want? Who do I want to be, and what do I want to do in that period of time? Like what's really important?
Well, and speaking of what's really important, I mean, you kind of talked about this transition that we all go through. Uh, at your age, or no, your mom's age, the people that care for her, that cared for her, that brought her up and made her the woman she is, they've been gone for a long time. And for your mom, her life is about giving to others because she was already given to, right? And I'm noticing that in my life that, and it's actually, I got to tell you, it's really meaningful. Like, I think part of the reason that I'm really happy with this stage in my life is I can look and I got the people above me that, like, man, I don't think I was an easy kid. I think I was pretty annoying, actually. You know what I mean? And
I could see that.
no, you know what I mean? Like, and like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, no, seriously, man. And and so I look back on it now and I'm like, but there were adults that like put up with me, and they actually like really cared about me, and they did things that were hard for me, right? And I think in a lot of ways, like my youth was like pretty easy. That, man, there was ways where I could be like, no, it was really hard. Like I had a hard time. Like I needed help, and it wasn't easy for me. And there was people that helped me, right? And I think one of the reasons I like this stage in my life is I'm kind of in the middle. I still have the Chris Wallaces, and like my scoutmaster when I was a kid. Like I'm still in contact with him, and sometimes we go on horseback riding trips or like canyoneering trips, and and uh and I just have these people that like the magnitude that they hold in my life is like, just I just can't put it into words. But now I'm starting to see like I have the opportunity to have influence like that in other people's lives. You know what I mean? And you having kids, I mean, man, no greater opportunity to have a positive influence and to say like, you know, I want to give to others what was given to me. My grandma, when she was in the hospital when her last living immediate family member passed away, like her sister. It was the last one that was still alive. She lived the longest out of her whole family, right? And I remember I didn't go to the funeral of my whatever that is. I don't know, my
Great aunt or something like
great
that.
aunt. I don't know. I didn't go to the funeral because my grandma couldn't go and she was in the hospital. And so I went and stayed with her. And she was sad she couldn't go. I really laid my best like argument on those doctors of how we could take care of her and take her and we'd bring her back if she was not doing good because she had pneumonia at the time, right?
Mm.
And the doctors eventually, I almost pulled it off, I think, but the doctors finally said, like, dude, I'm not letting her leave. And so I stayed with her. But I just remember her saying to me, she goes, I'm really an orphan now, because her parents had died a long time ago, but this was her last living family member. And she goes, I'm really an orphan now. And that feeling of the people you came up with and the people that cared for you were all gone. It was a harrowing moment of like what it's like to get to that stage in your life. It was really interesting for me.
Yeah, I mean, my grandma on my mom's side, she lived for quite a while after my grandpa passed, and they lived in the same neighborhood for almost their entire lives in Springville.
Good.
And I mean, I think she took like it was like I don't know, man. It was a lot of years before she died, and she was like so lonely, and she like wanted to go. You know, she's like she wanted to see my grandpa again. She wanted to see her siblings, her friends. Like she was lonely. She had like her kids and stuff that were around her, but it was like her peers, her loved ones were gone, and it was
Yeah.
just her,
Yeah.
and that was like overwhelmingly lonely for her.
Yeah. You're actually making me think of an interesting part that I like right when you started on this. I kind of jotted down different things. I was like, oh, there's something, right? I'm curious about this. Brett, do you think there's an afterlife? You think we're going somewhere, buddy?
Um, I believe so, man.
You think
Like
so?
yeah, like I mean, it's interesting. Like I guess kind of like the timing of like the conversation that we're having. Where it's like Good Friday, we're going into like Easter,
Yeah.
and I guess like that's kind of the connection. Like like it's even if you just look at like it's like Jesus was Jewish, right? And you go into like the like he was celebrating like the Passover, which kind of starts like in early like spring, like it's starting in the spring, and it's like we've gone through winter, like where everything kind of dies, and then spring it comes back to life, and yeah, it's it's interesting. Like I remember, like I was listening to. It was going to sound a little off, but it was like I was listening to. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but I used to listen to like Mike Tyson used to have like a podcast. I
Okay.
think he
I like
still
that. Actually,
does.
Mike Tyson is wildly fascinating psychologically. So
Yeah, he's really he really is. But anyways, I remember he was like talking to someone. I don't remember who he was talking to, and he's like, when you turn 50, he's like, you're gonna start trying to figure out God. He's like, you can put it off for a while, but when you're around when you turn 50 and you start getting a sense that you're gonna get close, like you get serious and you start trying to figure that out. And and the guy who's talking to is younger. He's like, just watch and see. When you
yeah,
get older,
yeah,
you'll. And I think that part of it is because you have to like. I think part of it is because of death. Like I think that it's like it's coming closer for you, and it may have come or it's getting close for the people that are closest to you. Like so, you're like your parents, and so then you have to sit and you have to look at it and say like, okay, all of this that we're going, like all of this that we're going through, like is this the end of it? Is this the end of consciousness? Like lights go out and that's it. And I don't know. I just don't feel that I don't feel that that's the case. I think that there's a realm, like for me, like I believe that it's God. I believe I mean, as a Christian, like believing in Jesus, that that it, like, that he overcame death. Like if you look at it like what's the first law of the universe is atrophy, right? Everything's
Entropy.
winding entropy. There we go. Entropy. Everything's winding down, right?
Yeah.
And so then this is like the moment that that's the moment that counteracts that. And so like I just feel like there's got to be a realm that exists outside of like time and space
Yeah. Yeah.
that we can't like that we can't see, but you get a sense and you get a feel for.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
And so
yeah.
and I mean I guess you could like I mean you could make like a argument that's saying that it's just like as you're trying to face like death, like you're trying to come up with some type of coping strategy, that there's
Right.
something beyond this. Like you can take that kind of cynical view of it, but I don't think that like, I don't know. It doesn't, that doesn't get too much traction for me, like, because it doesn't really serve like a purpose.
Right. And I do, man, one of the things I think about more and more, like when it comes to belief systems, I do think in truth, I do think there's like things that are true and things that are false. I do. But I also think there's a lot of things where that's actually not like the right way to think about it. It's a little bit better to just say, like, is it valuable? Does it work? Like, does it produce a result that is positive and meaningful in your life? You know what I mean? And so in that sense, like, I mean, in that sense, like, yeah, like I like that. And like, I mean, personally, I, I, I do think like the mind is like a meaning making machine, right? And I do think that people can put together things that maybe just serves a purpose and right. But even if I look at my own like experiences and I try to be real critical of like times when I'm like, oh, like this means this to me, right? And these unknowables, like these things that you can't, nobody knows, right? But but people will gain more and more certainty about like there's an afterlife or things that are unknowable, right? And even for me, when if I try and be like kind of critical of the moments that like push me in that direction and just go like, oh, like my mind like pushes me towards meaning, right? I still have a few things where I'm like, dude, I just can't explain that. Like I just there's things in life that like that just speak to something bigger than me and beyond me. And anyway, so I have those. I do have a lot of fun, or I find myself thinking about it a lot. Like there's the, and I think this gets argued a lot from a religious side. Uh, if there's no afterlife, then there's no purpose to life. And I I I don't know about that because I also okay, Death Cab for Cutie had their album Codes and Keys, and there's a song on it called St. Peter's Cathedral, right? And basically, Ben Gibbard, I'm assuming he wrote it, but Ben Gibbard, he kind of starts to explain St. Peter's Cathedral and like the immensity of that structure and how long they
It's
worked
crazy, man.
and how beautiful it is, right?
Yeah,
And he
it's wild.
and he goes from there to say like we're fighting so hard to prove that there's something beyond this and to like create that for ourselves. He almost it's kind of cynical, and the song ends with this is the end, there's nothing past this, and it says it over and over again. But it's interesting because when you listen to it, like that messaging is like if you just read those words without the musical accompaniment of it, you're like, dude, that's kind of a little rough, man. Like, did you need to say it 15 times, you know? But uh it's interesting, the tone of the song is actually really hopeful and inspiring and engaging. So I always get a kick out of that. And it does make me think of like knowing you can die. We started there at the beginning of this podcast, right? Like knowing you can die will put meaning into each breath. And I guess maybe both can exist, right? Like maybe we can walk through life feeling that there's something bigger than us, because man, that feels meaningful to me. And that there's something past this, but also that this life is uniquely special.
Yeah.
And you don't want to waste it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I remember a professor one time, and he was talking about how he's like, some of the people, like the best people that I've known have been like staunch atheists.
Yeah.
And he's like, which was surprising to him. And he says, but then as I became friends with them and learned about their worldview, it was like, if this is it, like you have to do the best that you can. You have to like try to make this like the world, leave it a better place, because that's it for you.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, he's like, it was surprising to me, like the morals and the urgency that they lived with.
Yeah.
Because for them it was like so temporary. And that was like, I mean, for me, like that was interesting to hear and to think about. And so like when I hear people say that when people say that they're not, there's like like, I don't know. You read Mere Christianity before?
Excerpts definitely haven't. No, I haven't read it.
Okay. There's like, so he starts by like trying to prove, like, I might make this wrong, but this is how I interpreted it. He says, like, if you've ever listened to two people argue, they're always arguing, they're appealing to something, to some sense that there's a right way that things should go. And yeah, and he says, like, and so if you just watch like a basic argument in the way that people argue, it seems like there's some keen sense that we have of justice and mercy and what it means to interact well with other people, that it just like, even if you don't believe that there is a God, for some reason you have some sense of like there should be justice, there should be mercy, there should
Yeah.
be kindness, and like in this, when it's like, so even the fact that, like, I look at it, and maybe this is me just because I'm trying to make my worldview like explain like that, like those people's like worldviews, is that like when I see somebody and they're like a staunch atheist who believes in only like logic and reason and science and this like and social like construction and like certain way, like all of that, like it's like you have to put your faith in something.
Yeah.
Right? There's no like knowing ins and outs of everything. So you got to put your faith in something, and everybody's like appealing to some type of values. And they might try to construct a large logical argument for those values, but it's still like ultimately, like if you look at the premise of the argument, is that there must be some kind of right or wrong that exists, that
Yeah.
like that exists.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so like I look at that and I'm like, even the atheist who's singing like this is the end, and that's their lyrics like 15 times, and then they sing this song that's like full of hope for this life. It's like, well, where's that hope coming from? Like, what are you appealing to? Like, where's that sense? Like,
one of
where's that
my
sense?
one of my
Where's that sense come from?
one of my favorite lines, Bright Eyes, Connor Oberst. If you swear that there's no truth, then who cares? How come you say it like you're right?
Yeah, right. That's awesome. Nailed it.
One of the best lyrical lines I've ever heard in my life. Oh my gosh, I love that line. Yeah. Um. Oh, I had a thought, but it slipped my mind. What were we saying before that? Let's see. Shoot.
We're talking about appealing to some kind of sense of like right and wrong,
Well,
like that it
and I actually
exists
find that
somewhere.
kind of inspiring because oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So
I mean, even if you just believe in like the interconnectedness of us, it's
sure.
like we're interconnected, and because we're interconnected, that requires us to live in like a certain way in order for this to like function like optimally. Like you can get very rational and kind of very like utilitarian and materialistic about it, but you still have to look like what's beyond that. Like where's that all coming from? And again, maybe that's just me like trying to make my worldview grand and explain other people's, but
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting that like that we that we growing up in like a Christian background, I think for whatever reason there was like a lot of ego in it, and maybe it's because of like the belief that you need Christ to be saved, and so part of that means that if you don't have Christ, then you don't have the answers and you can't be saved, right? And and so there was this kind of like component that said like you can't have morality without religion. But I like your thought, and my experience matches that too, that I actually find it quite hopeful that with or without religion, I my impression is that morality is inherent in humans, and like we're
oh, why?
good, and it's just there, the desire to be good and to do good, and things can contort that, but at our core, that's just in us. And I actually find that really beautiful and like hope inspiring, and makes me, I don't know, I really like that.
Yeah, and I think like and sometimes like I think because the way that media and what draws like attention is like all of the disasters and calamities and like wrongs in the world, you get like this overwhelming sense that that's like the way that the world is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you have to stop and like some of the times I think you have to stop and look at it statistically. And if I look at my own life, like how many days have I had that have actually been like like a existential like threat to my existence?
Mm.
It's not that or it's not that many.
Yeah.
It
Well,
doesn't happen that often. Like maybe for some other people, like like maybe it's just like I'm fortunate on where I live, but
yeah.
it's like
Right. Me too. I would definitely say that that might be why I think this way, is because I've had like a very blessed, fortunate life. I don't know. Right. It's possible that it's just we're lucky.
but even like statistically, if you look throughout the world, like there is like I mean, you can point to like cases and instances where there's like genuine evil that happens, but even like in those like it's statistically small.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like when you look at it like when you look at it from the whole like when you look at it from the whole. And so it's like sometimes you have to put it in like you have to put it into perspective and say like a lot of the world is like could it be functioning better? Like absolutely it could.
Oh yeah.
Should we strive to make it better? Yeah, absolutely. But it's also like it's not as like most people are like I think are genuine and are trying to live like good lives, and there's things that they could probably um do or be better sure, but I think if you look at it for the most part, like people are doing pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that the whole world isn't just burning down, and maybe maybe AI comes in and everything goes to hell. Like who knows, man? But it's like it's pretty encouraging, like
If you look, what is it, better angels of our nature, I can't remember who that author is, I can't remember his name, but he's like a notorious atheist, and it's interesting that he wrote a book that basically argues that like, and it seems inarguable in the other direction, if you look back through history, life is better for more people now than it has ever been, and it continues to head in that direction. You know what I mean? It's easier and better for more now. Now, does that mean like we've solved it? No, we haven't.
No, there's plenty of evil in the
We
world.
have more reason to have hope than we do to have like despair.
Despair.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Dude, I did want to. I finally remembered my thought from like 20 minutes ago.
It's
So you
it.
were talking about basically about like faith, and then faith versus like science, and like just what we can prove. And I think one of the things that's been valuable to me, there's these certain things where I started to believe something, or I was exposed to an idea or a way of thinking, and it has perpetually been a positive for me, right?
Okay.
uh and one of them was it was you and Ted. I think one of you or both of you was taking a class, and it was help me out here, but I think it was something like deconstructionist philosophy, right? Does that
Yeah.
ring a bell to you?
Yeah, I mean, basically like what I like did an undergrad in. It was like in cultural studies, so it's like I mean, deconstruction is kind of the thing that you learn.
And what was interesting about it is like there's a lot of value in saying like, what is this idea built on? Why does it exist? Can we look at the underpinnings of it? Like, right? But at its, but eventually, almost every idea is built on some level of faith or an assumption, if you want to put it in scientific terms, something we assume is true, but we can't prove it, right?
Yeah.
And I even got a real kick out of it. I obviously do not understand like physics, right? On a high level or on a low level. I would not pass.
But you found something intriguing though.
Right. Well, so there was this documentary on them discovering the Higgs boson, right? And I don't know anything about it, but it talks about like the Higgs boson is like what gives matter, right? And there's these two like opposing theories in physics of like one says supersymmetry and the other one talks about like a multiverse, right? And like I can't really even explain those, but there are these two opposing theories, and they thought for whatever reason the math says that if the Higgs boson is bigger than a certain size, then that leans towards one or the other. And if it's smaller than a certain size, and it would kind of help them solve like which theory is accurate, supersymmetry or the multiverse, right? I absolutely love it. They get their boson and they look at the size of it, and it's right in the middle, and it doesn't tell them anything, and we still just don't know. And to me, like a true scientist is a man of faith because they understand what we know and what we don't know, and they pursue learning more about what we don't know, and they continue to make hypotheses based on their best knowledge of what they think might be the answer, but they don't know it. Like, I just don't think anyone escapes faith. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, there was so I did graduate school at George Mason University, and they had this um anyways, the one of the guys that was in the conflict resolution department, he talked this philosopher. His name was Ram Hare, who was from Oxford. He was one of like Cherry Warner's friends and
Oh, cool.
buddies at Oxford. Anyways, he talked him into teaching this class in the conflict resolution department. And so some of his theories, like he specifically had one that was called positioning theory, that basically says like how I position myself. There's like a position call that I issue to you. So like for instance, like if I'm in a negotiation, right? So if you and I are in a conflict and we have like a mediation, and I speak first, and I say, well, the problem is that Carl's a jerk because of this reason, this reason, this reason, and this reason, right? So I've created a position for myself and a position for you. And so what typically happens in a negotiation is because I've gone first and I've outlined the conflict, is that typically, so I've issued what's called a position call to you. And so then you're going to look at it and be like, well, I'm not a jerk because of this, and this. But what you've done is that you've agreed to the framework.
Right.
You've agreed to the framework, but you feel like you have to dispute it, but you're arguing within my logic of how I framed it.
Right. I have
so this is
yes. Yeah.
So this is positioning theory. So in conflict resolution, they grabbed onto these, to this guy because he was like, he wrote like all this like whole books on how like this positioning theory, like how it works. So anyways, I take this class with this Oxford professor, and he's like from New Zealand originally, and I don't think this guy was 5 feet tall. He like looked like he was like straight from like Hogwarts,
Not
like,
imposing.
and the way that he talked, like he was like legit, like he looked like he was like a Hogwarts like
That's awesome
professor. Anyways, people are like, so he would then talk about like positioning theory and all of this like stuff, and he'd have like these examples that he had like researched on like soccer hooligans and like stuff like. Anyways, all these like the way the pronouns were, like the way that like he was a world expert on pronouns and the way that they work and like positioning, and really fascinating stuff, right? Well, inevitably you'd have like you have all these students that are there to study like conflict, and they'd ask him like questions, be like, yeah, but how does this theory like apply to like the genocide in Rwanda? Which was like, anyways, like that was always like kind of, for some reason, like the genocide in Rwanda, I think because it was like more recent.
Yeah.
You know, like you could get into like why this, like how this happened.
To say we need to like solve that.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, this is nice and all, like, but what does pronouns have to do with a genocide in Rwanda? And he'd get like some kind of question like that. And so here he's like probably the smartest person that any of us are going to meet. And he would just be like, well, I don't know. I'm not an expert in the genocide in Rwanda, so I can't speak to it.
Right. So he understood positioning enough that he didn't say I have to engage in the positioning you're presenting.
Yeah, but he knew what he knew and he knew what he didn't know.
Right. But it's interesting.
So
yeah. Like but
he understood positioning. Like he wrote the book on it, and so people would try to be like, "We want you to be this conflict this analyst,"
right?
And he would refuse it, and he'd just be like, "I don't know." He's like, "I couldn't speak to the genocide in Rwanda." I'm like, "I don't have expertise. Anything that I would say about it would just be my opinion, which is no better than anyone's in this class. So as a professor, I don't have anything to profess."
It's really
about
fascinating to me because I think about it a lot, like how problematic ego can be. And usually the more renowned you are, the more that you've accomplished, the more books you've written, the more people are sitting in front of you to hear what you have to say. It's hard to fight that sense that I should know the answer. I find this professor very impressing that he goes, I don't have to know the answer. I just have to participate. And if so,
he knew. Yeah, I mean, it was like, to me, what was incredible about it, and it was like a lot of the professors, you'd ask them and they would know, and if you ask them about like they'd have something to say about probably anything, you know. But it was like here, this was like the smartest and most accomplished professor that I've ever been around.
Right.
And I've never seen a professor like admit that he didn't know something more than him.
Yeah.
I mean, he was at the end of his career, you know, he was like in his like late 70s. So it's like, this guy had been in academia for a long time. He knew a lot.
Yeah. Well,
but he was very clear on what he didn't know. And so it was very refreshing. And people get so frustrated, man. They were like, people hated his class. They're like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get it. And I'm like, you have to understand like who he is. Like, he came here by invitation to teach. Like, he's not a conflict professor.
Well, and also like, why is it on him to answer this question? Like, why don't you say how it does or doesn't apply to Rwanda? What I really think is interesting about it, as I think about it more, is it really speaks to his objective in the moment. Like, if I become a professor because I want people to think I'm smart, well, then I always need to be the smartest guy in the room, right? And I always need to have an answer. You know what I mean? I always need to defend that. But if I'm just joining somebody in an exploration of a thought, and maybe I'm leading the discussion, but I'm just exploring it and I'm just being open and honest, and that's my objective, I never have to know the answer. And it says something really interesting about like the way that he saw himself in it and what his objective was. It didn't.
Yeah, I mean, his objective was to teach like what he had expertise in,
Yeah.
and no further than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because he was very clear on it. He was like, if I speak on that, I'm just giving you my opinion. And
But I
he's like,
don't.
my opinion's not any better than anybody else's in this room. Like that's like but I'm not. But he's like, I'm not gonna do that.
Yeah.
So it's like it's just. I mean, to me, it was like, and again, like he had no ego. You know, it wasn't like, well, ask me about something that I know so I can be astounded, like amazing. He didn't care about that. It was like he was like one of those rare people where you look at like if you want to talk about a man of science, that it was like. He knew what he knew, like what he had researched. He knew what he knew, and he knew what he didn't know. And
Yeah.
it's very, very clear to him. And that was probably the most profound thing. And so you talked about like positioning, right? Like this is the guy that wrote the book on positioning theory, where everybody wants to position themselves as an expert. Come
Yeah.
listen to me. And he was very clear on what his position was. He was there to, in his mind, even though he was in this department that I don't think that he fully understood because he wasn't a conflict resolution professor. Right. He was very clear on what his position was and what it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And everybody nowadays, because it's like, I mean, even like us, like, you know, like we have like a podcast where we're like sitting here talking about stuff, but what do we know? You know, not much. Like, what do we actually have expertise in? You know, like, not much. I still think it's like, it's okay because neither of us are showing up. Like we're not coming into this podcast to talk a bit. We're the experts that know something.
Yeah.
It's just like we're two friends that like love each other and enjoy talking to each other and want to explore different topics. And so that's okay.
Yeah.
But
it's fun to join with people that are just curious.
yeah, but you're just curious, and you can have like that's a different type. Like that's a different type of conversation because that's an exploration.
Yeah.
And so that's the way that we're positioning ourselves. Because you know, it's like even when you ask like, do I believe in an afterlife? You know, like yeah, I do. I believe in do I think I'm an expert on that? Do I have like unequivocal faith in that situation? Could I like speak convincingly of it to other people? I would say that that's between them and God. It's not between me and them.
It's a fun question, and it was fun to talk to you about it because really, I don't care about if there is or isn't an afterlife. I'm really trying to understand you because I find you,
yeah, no, exactly,
you of value, and I find you interesting, and I find the way that you are in life to be something I could learn from. And so it was really fun for me to put
and vice versa,
an open question out there and just see like, and I loved that you're like, yeah, I think so. And you didn't try, like I said, you didn't try and prove it and say, well, there has to be
because
Karl.
that's,
you know,
no, yeah, there has to be, or like here, let me prove it to you with this and that. And it's like, you know, like sometimes I watch people like they like argue about like religion and stuff, and it's like I don't know. Some people are okay, they're okay. Like for me, it's hard for me to engage in that, like in that type of a conversation. Like I would much rather, like if I was like encountered somebody, just like you said, like I'd be much more curious. Like, well, why do you believe this? I would say for me, like, why do I believe in God? I look at the miracle that it was for me to be rescued, and the amazing like coordination that had to occur for that to happen. And I look at it, and you can almost, like, for me, like I can see the hand of God in work, like through like all of the people that it took to rescue me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's like I can't explain it.
Right.
You know, like I can't explain it other than like that it was a grace and a gift from God. So do I believe in God? Yeah, because I've seen him pursue me in my life to save my life
I
for some reason.
I too have received things that I didn't think I earned and I don't think I deserve. And that's, to me, that's grace. And so, yeah, I believe grace exists in the world, and it brings light and beauty into the world. And when you receive it, the only effect it has in your life is, well, I received things that I didn't deserve, but I needed, and I want to put that back out into the world. Grace begets grace. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly, man. And so it's like my life, like I can't, like it's too obvious. And somebody that was to just come in and be like, well, this is all coincidence, this is all like this and this are all coincidence. It's like, what are okay, then let's look at this statistically. What are the chances that in this moment all of these things came together?
Yeah.
Was that just my unconscious mind?
Well, and
No, because there's other people that came from nowhere.
once again, though, like proving or disproving it, but who receives so much light and beauty in their life and then says it means nothing? Like, it's just like, why would you? Why wouldn't you say no? Like, it means something, you know? Speaking of things that mean things.
Here, you want to see a living, breathing miracle? Come here, Sir. No, I'm talking about you, buddy.
Soren! What's up,
I mean,
buddy?
this is a living, breathing miracle for you.
Yeah, how you doing, buddy?
Look at the size of that wind fan right there.
All right. Look at that pinwheel.
All right, bud. Hey, I'm almost finished. You want to just head outside for just a little bit? You want the dogs to come out to play with you?
Yeah.
Dude, why don't you go hang out with that awesome boy of yours? That seems like as good a place as any, man. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share? Or?
Yeah, I think, like, I guess just like ending on this, and this is like the Easter message, right? Is that it's like death, rebirth, like new beginnings, like it's we should all strive to live like the very best lives that we could in the time that we have, like in this.
Here's my closing thought for you. Whatever beliefs we have in life, they should serve our life for the better.
Yeah.
Anyway, love you,
To
buddy.
the life affirming.
Freaking really enjoyed talking to you. And yeah, I'm jealous that you get to hang out with Soren and I don't. I'm gonna go home and
Yeah, man. He's the best. And he's got a giant pinwheel.
Okay, buddy. Talk to you later.
All right, man. All right. We'll see ya.
We'll see you, bud.
All right, bye.